death of a Detroit teen. Mark Bessner was convicted of involuntary manslaughter for a chase that took 15-year-old Damon Grimes' life.
It was a decision 2 years in the making. Priya Mann is live tonight with the punishment that trooper could be facing. Priya?
And, you know, during his testimony, this former state trooper said he thought the teenager was armed and reaching for a weapon. That 15-year-old did not have a gun. And tomorrow, Mark Bessner will learn his fate after a verdict was reached last month.
Guilty of the lesser
investigation back in December. Tonight, we're breaking new ground with something even the police don't have. These guys accused of being rogue cops were actually caught on tape during a drug raid. We've got the recording, and it's not flattering for these cops who are now facing criminal charges. You're watching a performance by a rock band called One, Others Not Equal. But this story isn't about heavy metal. It's about allegations of heavy-handed and unprofessional police tactics. The lead singer, Rudy Simpson, says he was a victim of these tactics in a drug raid at his home. It all centers around this man, State Police Lieutenant Luke Davis, who's now facing corruption charges. In June of 2008, the Omni Drug Task Force, headed by Lieutenant Davis, executed a search warrant on Rudy Simpson's Monroe County home. They based the search on an anonymous tip and a marijuana stem they said they found in the garbage. When the cops said Rudy's band was practicing in this basement recording studio. What the police didn't know is that the microphones were hot and everything was being recorded. Take a listen.
Hope they're not mixing.
But they were mixing, and two cops take turns singing on the mic, not knowing the whole thing is being recorded.
I love rock and roll. Looking back on the memory.
While those cops were in the basement, Rudy, his friend Jeremy, and members of the band were taken upstairs.
The repo man in a chokehold, a very long chokehold, to keep him from repossessing his SUV. Then, when other cops arrived, he tried to run.
It was all caught on video, and tonight we've learned why he was already under investigation before that wild arrest. News 13's Alex Goldsmith has the story.
Jessica, Dick, before and after his arrest, you hear State Police Officer Charles Vernier telling Los Lunas cops how to do their jobs. He may not be doing his for much longer.
I'm going to give you one more second to let him go and get back before you get tased.
How did a state cop find himself on the wrong end of a taser? It all started with a repo gone wrong outside a Los Lunas apartment complex.
Charles, let him go, Charles! Charles, let him go!
The man in the chokehold was trying to repossess state cop Charles Vernier's Nissan Xterra. The 6'5" Vernier claims the repo man shoved him. The repo man says he didn't. But cell video from the man's wife is indisputable.
Charles, let him go!
You're not taking my vehicle today.
The chokehold lasts at least 8 minutes and gets pretty strong at points.
Yes, I'm restraining you because you assaulted me. And I am going to continue to
I'm a repossessor.
But when Los Lunas police show up, it's Vernier who's in trouble.
Step around the vehicle now.
handcuff you.
Step around the vehicle now. Turn around. Turn around. Turn around. Turn around.
The state cop finally starts to listen, and then
Put your hands on your head.
No, I'm not being handcuffed today.
Yes, you are. Turn around.
he bolts before tripping over his own feet. How does Officer Vernier describe it?
I was walking away from you and you used an excessive amount of force. You were walking away. I was walking.
Vernier was arrested for aggravated battery and interfering
Specifically with the issues of Jason Van Dyke shooting Laquan McDonald 16 times. That's what the jury found him guilty of. And that's what we're asking you to sentence him on. A sentence of prison is always difficult. It will be difficult on this defendant, like it is on every other defendant who appears before you. It will be difficult on the Van Dyke family. It will be difficult on the family of law enforcement, not just in this city, but across this country. But a prison sentence is what is appropriate for this defendant, given his conduct, given what he has been convicted of in this case. A significant prison sentence, Judge. When you look at his conduct, shooting Laquan McDonald 16 times, a prison sentence of between.
There's always a big concern with, of course, was Van Dyke's safety, not only by his wife, but also by his attorneys. Now, his wife says that her husband did get attacked in his cell, and he did suffer some bruises in that attack. His wife also saying that she believes that her husband was targeted.
They are punishing him for being who he is. If people want to say that this is, you've said it from day one, everybody said it from day one, this is a race issue. This is a gigantic race issue. They put my husband in a setting to be harmed because of the fact that he was a white man who harmed a black in the line of duty.
No, that was Van Dyke's wife, Tiffany, with two of her husband's attorneys by her side. This was her worst fear, that someone would harm her husband in prison. One of Van Dyke's attorneys says she was tipped off by a guard at the prison in Danbury, Connecticut, that a group of African-American men went into Jason's cell and attacked him on February 7th, shortly after he entered the general population.
A PD officer who admitted to randomly shooting two unarmed men in Westchester County is heading to prison.
Brendan Cronin was sentenced today to 9 years in prison. CBS 2's Steve Langford was in the courtroom, and he has reaction from the victims.
Brendan Cronin, just 28 years old, and now fired New York City cop in court to face sentencing, but not before hearing from his victims.
Mr. Borelli and Mr. Felice wish to address the court on the topic of sentencing.
Joe Felice and Rob Borelli, two men on their way home from playing hockey 2 years ago when then off-duty officer Cronin, intoxicated, started shooting his NYPD service weapon at their vehicle at a red light in Pelham. Felice telling his attacker in court what he remembers from the ER that night. Quote, "I knew I was dying. I was terrified. I cried and bawled. You have to save me. I have a 3-year-old. The court not allowing cameras to record these victim impact statements. The other person in the car that night telling their shooter how he felt racing to the hospital.
Day for former NYPD officer Peter Liang. A Brooklyn judge will soon announce if he'll get jail time. It could mean up to 15 years in prison, or go with the prosecution's recommendation, no prison time at all. Eyewitness News reporter Safan Kim is outside the courthouse with more. Safan?
Well, Charlene, is Peter Liang heading to prison? That is what today comes down to. The rookie cop, the former rookie cop, is facing up to 15 years behind bars, but in all likelihood, he will get little to no jail time. This is a case that has made international headlines, and depending on which side of this debate you stand on, you'll be hoping for two very different outcomes today in court.
In the matter of the people of the state of New York against Peter Liang.
It was a case full of unexpected twists and turns.
Jail time for a former Orlando police officer.
Yeah, in just the last couple of hours, a judge handed down the sentence. It came after that former officer took the stand today. The judge sentenced Peter Delio to 51 weeks in jail, followed by probation for this incident in 2014. Videos showing him kneeing a man in the stomach. That man later had surgery for a ruptured spleen. News 6 reporter Brittany Harris was in the courtroom this afternoon. She joins us now live. And Brittany, we understand that Delio got emotional on the stand today.
That's right, Ginger. Peter Delio did get a little emotional as he talked about what happened. And while apologizing to Robert Lease, the man you saw there in that video, Delio says
Why he says he had no choice but to send him off to jail. And it tops our news at 5:30. Today, former St. Clair Shores police officer Michael Notoriano was sentenced to 6 months in jail.
That sentence is for his role in a violent confrontation with a group of Detroit men who stole his daughter's cell phone. Our Lauren Vidal was in court as the judge delivered a strong message along with a stiff sentence.
Here's some background. A former St. Clair Shores police officer up against one misdemeanor charge here today at Frank Murphy after a jury found him not guilty of 10 other charges, including armed robbery and racial intimidation. He thought at sentencing, probation out the door. But that's not what the judge had in mind.
I do deeply regret this incident.
Ex-St. Clair Shores police officer Mike Notoriano stood before Judge Kenny with an apology.
There were no winners at all in this situation, not only for myself and my family, but for all of those involved.
Every single thing he's done as a police officer exemplifies
everything we want in a police officer.
But this father, husband, and 20-year police veteran will now spend 6 months in the Wayne County Jail. Judge Kenny setting an example. After 18 months probation was the prosecution's recommendation.
That it be a deterrent to others who might think to act in that way.
Earlier this year, a jury found Notoriano guilty of willful neglect of duty by a public official after he and a Detroit police sergeant, David Pomeroy, pointed a gun at 2 men and called them the N-word at this Citgo gas station in Detroit in July of 2013. Photos show Pomeroy and Notoriano at the scene, both off duty at the time. The men they confronted allegedly stole Notoriano's 16-year-old daughter's cell phone. Only the misdemeanor charge stuck. Notoriano's attorney claimed his client's actions nearly 3 years ago.
Sentenced tonight for a former police officer from Oklahoma City, convicted of assaulting several women, and the grandmother credited with cracking the case wide open. And tonight, how the judge ruled late today, that former cop now sentenced to 263 years behind bars. Here's ABC's Pierre Thomas.
These girls were teenagers, and Mario Lozada used his position and influence as a police officer to prey on the young women, offering money and drugs in exchange for sex. This morning, a judge sentenced Lozada to 8 years in prison for unlawful sexual contact with a minor and pandering sexually oriented material. The now former Cleveland police officer was arrested in Garfield Heights last year with a gun and a 15-year-old girl in his car. Another victim's mother read a letter from her daughter